Hey guys, my name is Kai. I'm a producer from Tech360. You have seen me in some of the videos that I've done with Bobby. I'm usually behind the camera, not in front. But enough about me. Let's talk about this guy right here. This is the Asus ZenBook Pro Duo. And I've been using it for a couple of weeks as my daily driver. The very first thing that will stand out to you when you open up this laptop is the display. You get a 15.6-inch 4K HDR OLED display that is capable of 100% DCI-P3 coverage for up to 400 nits of brightness, and also touch enabled. Now the display is very nice, as that's to be expected of OLED. You get rich and vibrant colors and with true deep blacks. If you really want to enjoy your content, this display will not disappoint. Up top you get a webcam as it should be, and you also get support for Windows Hello. Now if you look down, this is where you'll notice where the Pro Duo get the Duo in the name. There is actually a second display located right beneath the main display. Asus calls this the ScreenPad Plus. Now, this second display has an aspect ratio of 32:9. It is of an IPS variant instead of OLED, and it is technically half of 4K with pixels measuring 3840 by 1100. Now, when I first saw this at Computex in Taipei, I first thought of the MacBook Pro with the touch bar. Now, the way that Asus implemented it and the way they promoted it was kind of similar, but this is way different. This is an actual second display. Asus did implement a few tricks to help you with the whole experience of using these two displays on the laptop. From the left of the display, you can actually see an arrow. Asus calls this the launcher. Using the launcher, you can gain access to a few functions and it will be greeted with something that is similar to something like your app drawer on your smartphone. So here are some of the things that you can do. You can drag and drop apps to this launcher. You can set up to 4 task groups, with each task group remembering up to 5 applications, 2 on top and 3 on the bottom. You can also quickly swap the position of your application on either display with a single tap of a button. Other than that, whenever you drag an application around, either using a mouse or with your finger, you'll be greeted with an action menu. This will give you the option to either switch the app between the two displays, pin it to the launcher, or to extend to a full view covering both displays. So these are some of the things that you can do with the second display on your ZenBook Pro Duo. Now, Asus is also working with other manufacturers and software developers to work on apps that will actually make full use of the second display, but that is still in the works and more is to come. There is, however, a catch to this second display, but more on that later. Let's talk about performance. Our model comes equipped with an Intel Core i9-9980HK, an Nvidia RTX 2060, up to 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and a 1TB NVMe SSD. Now, as you can tell from these specs, it is a pretty powerful laptop. I did run a few synthetic benchmarks, but please keep in mind that these do not reflect actual real-world performance. Running Prime 95, the CPU quickly hit a top boost of 3.9 GHz and 85 degrees Celsius within the first couple of minutes before slowly settling down at 73 degrees at 2.6 GHz. In Formark, the GPU sustained at 78 degrees Celsius but at a GPU clock speed of 1050 MHz. In Cinebench R20, the CPU scored a multi-thread performance of 3218 while a single-thread performance of 440. Using Crystal Disk, the 1TB NVMe SSD scored a sequential read speed of about 2.7 GB per second and write speeds of about 2.3 GB per second. But for more real-world tests, we have DaVinci Resolve, which we use here at Tech360. Rendering a 10-minute 1080p edit took 8 minutes and 3 seconds to render, while a 15-minute 4K edit took 17 minutes and 20 seconds. Both edits are filled with a couple layers of video, a few graphics here and there, a lot of light, and of course music. Okay, but enough about synthetic stuff and the creative applications. What about gaming? After all, this has an RTX 2060 inside. For esports titles like CSGO, you can comfortably play at full 4K at the higher settings, netting you an average of about 107 frames per second, or go all out at 1080p, which will net you over 200 frames per second. For games like PUBG, the system will be strained a little more, with 4K Ultra giving you an average of 32 frames per second, while 1080p Ultra will hover just shy of 100 frames per second. AAA titles like Final Fantasy 15 will be even tougher. At a 4K high preset, it will give you a rough average of 30 frames per second, while at 1080p higher setting, it will net you around 60 frames per second. And since we have an RTX 2060, we did test Battlefield 5 with ray tracing. At 4K Ultra with ray tracing on, you'll get a mere 18 frames per second, but if you drop that down to 1080p, you can get roughly 40 frames per second, which is technically playable. If you turn off ray tracing, however, you'll get 30 frames per second at 4K Ultra, but if you drop it down to 1080p, you'll get way above 90 frames per second, which I think this is the ideal setting to play. Temperature, however, is a bit of a mixed bag. When using applications such as Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, you will roughly see your CPU and GPU temperatures stay at about 82 degrees Celsius, with it boosting way above its boost clocks. But when you're gaming, especially on Battlefield 5, the CPU did thermal throttle and it will hover around 93 degrees Celsius while the GPU will stay around 82 degrees Celsius. And these are the temperatures you will expect even with this hinge design. They call it ergo lift. It will lift the laptop away from the desk quite a fair distance to allow more airflow. However, I believe the temperatures are as such because of the display, which basically takes up more space where it could have been used for heat pipes or heat sinks to better dissipate the heat. With that said, however, you only see such temperatures while gaming, so for what it's worth, it's an adequate cooling solution for the design. Now, if you open up the laptop, you'll be greeted with a 71 watt-hour battery, which will net you around 3.5 hours on normal usage, or a solid hour if you're gaming. Now, the thing to take note here is that you only have access to the NVMe SSD and the Wi-Fi 6 chipset. The RAM, however, is soldered on, so depending on where you are, you will have to choose your configurations before you actually purchase this laptop, because there's no upgrading it after you've bought it. Right at the bottom corner, you will also see where the speakers are located, and they are side firing. The speakers are decent, they do rumble a little with a bit of bass, and vocals are clear, but the volume just doesn't get that loud. So far, it's been pretty positive. You get great performance in a beautiful looking chassis with 2 displays. But I will say this, it is a jack of all trades, master of none, and I'll explain why. We come back to the display. Now, it is a nice looking display. It is 4K, OLED, supports HDR, and is also touch enabled. But it is only at 15.6 inches. By default, when you get this laptop, Windows scaling will be recommended at 250% scaling. And at 250% scaling, it just doesn't make sense. My suggestion is to drop it down to at least 200%. But at 200%, what does that get you? At 200% scaling, if you do the math, it will only provide you the same amount of information that a 1080p display does. The only pros to a 4K display at this scale is that you get a clearer image and a crispier image compared to 1080p. So personally, I use it at 150%. But for some people out there, it might be a bit too small. And to be frank, this is not an Asus issue. This is an issue of Windows and scaling. But it is something to keep in mind when you are deciding to purchase a laptop with a 4K display. The next thing is the second display, the ScreenPad Plus. Now, I do like the idea of a second display right in your laptop, not needing to bring about an external monitor, but it still has its flaws. Firstly, is the angle. When you're sitting normally at the desk using the laptop, it is too steep of an angle. I find myself looking up and down way too often, and yes, you can put your timeline down, as for example if you're using your editing software, or let's say your toolbar or toolkit when you're using stuff like Microsoft Word or Excel. But if it's things that you will actually frequently use, you'll find yourself looking down, looking up, and it gets annoying after time. And more than annoying, it gets tiring after time. It's just not ergonomic and not intuitive. Next, the pen is also sort of a mixed experience. Yes, you can draw, but don't expect qualities of a Wacom or an Apple Pencil. But the main thing is that to even draw, it's somewhat of an awkward position. 1, it's not comfortable. 2, your arm will almost always rub against the keys. And 3, the second display right below is not big enough. Ultimately, you can draw, but I would say it's more suited for scribbling or note-taking more so than professional work. The other thing about the second display is that you can't expect to leave your applications where you have left them after you have closed the lid on the laptop. What happens is that when you close the lid with your applications open and you open it up back again, you'll find that all your applications on the bottom display will have shifted back to the main display. Now, this is not Asus' fault. This is an issue with Windows and how it deals with multiple monitors. I'm sure you guys out there with multiple monitors understand what is happening right here. But in the end, it all adds up to the experience, and it's just not as great as it's supposed to be. Next is the keyboard and trackpad itself. Now, a wrist rest does come included with the ZenBook Pro Duo, and I highly suggest that you use it if you're planning to use this laptop as a desktop replacement. The typing experience is definitely much better with the wrist rest. But if you're constantly on the go, using the keyboard without the wrist rest is doable. However, it is not ideal and your hands will get tired after roughly 15 minutes of typing. The other thing is also you can't place the laptop right at the edge of whatever desk you are sitting on. For example, say a table at Starbucks, because then you won't have enough space for your palm to rest on the desk. So keep that in mind that you actually need more space than normal compared to other laptops with a standard keyboard layout. The trackpad is decent, but due to the design of layout, it is squished to the corner and is longer vertically than horizontally. However, you do get a numpad with it, so for those of you who like the numpad, you do get the option. Next is the ports. For a device this size, it is slightly disappointing. All you get is two USB-A 3.1, you get USB-C with Thunderbolt 3, you get HDMI 2.0 output, and a headphone jack. That's it. Honestly, for what Asus is touting this laptop to be, and with creatives as one of their target audience, I would have at least liked to see an SD card reader. It would have made the I/O layout a little more versatile. Lastly is the price. This laptop right here in Singapore costs way more than 4,000 Sing dollars. Yes, you do get a 4K OLED display and a second display to boot. It is pretty unique, but the price is a little tough to swallow. But with every laptop out there, there are pros and there are cons. So ultimately, who is this laptop for? If you're a gamer and purely a gamer, I say look elsewhere. In fact, just look right across, there is ROG. If you are a content creator, same thing, look elsewhere. For that amount of money, you can get better options out there that have better I/O with the same specs and even the same 4K OLED display. But if you're looking for something unique with the horsepower to run all your creative applications and games that can do a little bit of everything, this might be something you can consider. The only thing I will say is that you can ignore all the fluff that Asus has touted about the second display and just treat it as a second display as you would an external monitor, and I think you will have a much happier time owning this laptop. So that's it. These are my thoughts on the Asus ZenBook Pro Duo. If you have any questions, do drop us a comment down below. Click on the notification bell for more of such content. Subscribe to us if you haven't. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Till the next one. See you.